All right. So, why don't we begin? First thing for me is to say greetings to all of you.
Bin ich jetzt draußen mit der Kamera? Ja, ne? Super.
Okay. Greetings to all of you who have made it in person. Greetings to all who I saw with the little buttons and who are participating on the internet. And greetings to our two distinguished guests, namely Professor Linn Washington from Temple University, Professor of Journalism, long-time friend and colleague of Mumia Abu-Jamal, who knew him already before Abu-Jamal's arrest, and who has been reporting this scandalous case ever since. Our other distinguished guest is Reverend Wendell Griffen, who used to be a state court judge in the state of Arkansas and is an accomplished theologist. Just put out a book which you may briefly talk about yourself when it's your turn to talk. And who has been an ardent supporter of justice for Mumia Abu-Jamal ever since he heard about the case, and has been very supportive in the last 2 or 3 years. Okay, the title of today's talk, of today's discussion, is 42 years in prison and counting, the scandalous case of Mumia Abu-Jamal. Those of you who have seen the leaflet, the flyer we have distributed, will know that I and my sister Annette, who is also present, have been working on this for almost quarter century. We came to the case with a lot of optimism and thought this has to be over in 2 years, then the federal judge will have to overturn the conviction and Abu-Jamal will be free. But we are still here. We are still here. We have 42 years and counting. And I will walk you very, very quickly through a few aspects of this scandalous case. Before that, I will give a brief illustration of what's been happening in Germany in particular in the last 25 years. This is the latest of many books we have put out on the case.
Kannst du ein bisschen lauter sprechen?
Jemand hat noch die Kamera, das Mikro an.
Ah.
Okay, everybody who is not intending to speak, please switch off the microphone because there is background noise. Okay, this is the latest book on the case. It's not just on the case, there is an introduction by Johanna Fernandez and myself, which introduces Mumia as a person, and there is an afterword by myself where I analyze the case, and the rest is taken up by texts mostly from death row by Mumia Abu-Jamal himself. And the rare quality of these texts consists in that there are many texts from the early 1980s when Mumia was not yet worldwide known, and they count among those which are most impressive in my view. So this is a book which we brought along, which is highly recommended, and tonight we will also sell them for a discount price of 20 euros. I know that's still a lot, but I think it's really worth it for the quality of the texts and hopefully also for the foreword and the afterword. So this is Mumia briefly before he was arrested. That is his youngest son, Nazi. And this is Mumia today. In between, there are a number of photos where he doesn't look as good as he looks on this photograph, because one of the sad realities about prison is that Mumia is actually a severely ill man. He has survived hepatitis C, he has survived heart surgery, he has diabetes, he has serious eczema, which I know a lot about because I used to have it a couple of decades ago, very painful. And this goes to an extent where his physical advisor, his doctor, Dr. Ricardo Alvarez in San Francisco, says freedom is the only treatment. So this is urgent not just because 42 years are definitely too much, but because it could happen to Mumia, what recently happened to another prisoner. He could actually die in prison. That other prisoner I had opportunity to talk about in seminars of mine here at Poindexter. Similar to Mumia's case, this was a frame-up. There is no evidence that Ed Poindexter was guilty of anything. And the first thing that happened was he had his leg amputated. That was half a year ago, and quite recently the news was that he has died at the age of 79, I believe, and he was in prison, believe it or not, since 1970. And the then president of the FBI personally intervened to frame him up in suppressing evidence. So evidence was suppressed on the direction of J. Edgar Hoover personally. Okay, but before I digress, let me move through this really very quickly. This was the first big event which we had in Heidelberg with the support of many people from this institute, some of them still here. This is us at the Bismarckplatz demonstrating for Mumia. And this guy here with the short hair, who is talking into a microphone, that's yours truly when I was still a student. So that must have been like in 2001. I was not yet a doctor, didn't even have my MA. And from that, you can perhaps measure the time that Mumia has spent all those years behind bars. This is something that we did when Mumia's life was once again in actual danger. That was in 2010. He was brought before the federal court because all of a sudden, on account of a Supreme Court decision, it looked like Mumia could actually be executed. Unfortunately, the court turned it down. And on that occasion, we made probably the biggest banner for Mumia worldwide of all times, which we are very proud about. And there was quite a number of people on the old bridge, as you can see.
25 meters.
Yeah. This is the whole thing in the making. I still remember that quite vividly. And this is something that people in Berlin did. This is in another dimension as large as the other transparent. Here you see one of the most astonishing aspects of Mumia's personality, which Annette and I could see live when we visited him in 2012, and I visited him before in 2010. When you come to the prison, this is always, this triggers quite a lot of anxiety. And when you come to prison to visit him, he is the one who takes away the anxiety by the intact personality that he still has. A lot of warmth, a lot of humor. I don't know how he does that. So you see it goes on and on and on. This was another action that we took in 2011, unfortunately unsuccessfully. That's another case of a clear frame-up of a black man for murder. Troy Davis was actually executed in September 2010. We just couldn't believe it because the case was so clear. Amnesty also pulled all the stops in order to save him. It was not doable. That was at the Frankfurt Book Fair. Another big banner. So there is no lack of big banners, as you can see. And this was what we did outside. So for each of the 30 years that Mumia had spent in prison, we read texts for freedom. You see myself, hair is longer, has reached its present length. Okay, and this was in memory of some of the other people who had been executed. Each execution is a scandal, but these circumstances were particularly scandalous. Francis Newton, another person, very likely innocent. Stan Tookie Williams was a gang leader of the Crips, I believe, who was a clear case of rehabilitation. Wrote books for children in order to tell them not to do what I have done. Didn't help him. The Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger in California, had him executed, rejected clemency. Okay, that's Mumia, visited by two supporters, Dr. Johanna Fernandez and Heidi Bugosian. Alright, more actions in front of the US Embassy.
$650 meters of banners.
Okay, but
I am
these
the number
were
checker.
bound together, that doesn't...
Yeah.
Okay, and this is one of the latest events that we did. You can see that our two guests, Reverend Judge Wendell, then still Judge Wendell Griffen, and Linn Washington Jr. also participated. And this was another moment where I for once believed that we had a fighting chance that the judge would do justice to the case of Mumia Abu-Jamal. I think we were that close, but nevertheless we didn't make it, and here we are.
And what was the reason that it was not successful?
We will come to that. We will come to that later in a lot of detail. Okay, that's one of the things that each and everyone can do. People can write to Mumia. And after this quick overview, I have only 15 to 20 minutes left to really describe the case, which is what I will now do very quickly. And then I will hand over to Linn Washington and Wendell Griffen. There is a glitch here. All right, here we go. Okay, before I describe this scene here, a few remarks on Mumia as a person and why he got into the crosshairs of the police. Mumia was born in 1954, right in time to become, still as a youth, as a young man, a member of the Black Panther Party in Philadelphia, the town where he was born. He said his first action was he went to an election event when a racist governor was trying to become a presidential candidate, George Wallace from Georgia, expressly for racial segregation and stuff. And he dared to protest with a few of his friends, and he was beaten up by a white mob. And in his naivete then, he asked the police for help, and he got some more beating from the police and was kicked in the face. And he said, to this day, I'm grateful to that policeman because he kicked me right into the Black Panther Party. Black Panther Party, militant civil rights organization. He participated for approximately 1.5 years. Then went to college, discovered radio journalism, went back to Philadelphia, married, had 3 children, and started to work as a radical journalist in Philadelphia, both in print and on the radio. And one of his specialties was reporting on police brutality, and you can imagine that didn't make him into the darling of the police. Another consequence, fateful consequence of his radical reporting was that he was fired from several stations, so he had to moonlight as a cab driver in the night, and that was when he got involved in an event that also involved his brother, and that took place in downtown Philadelphia at the intersection of 13th and Locust, and that's what you can see here. The intersection of 13th and Locust, and what you can also see, and that's something I noted that when I prepared the presentation, that's sometimes omitted in our presentations of the case. Tragically, a cop was killed, and he also deserves mention in my view, even though when talking about the case, I have a few good things to say about him. But he was killed for his family. It was also a tragedy, and so he should be mentioned. Police officer Daniel Faulkner, who was in his mid-20s at the time. So what happened? His Mumia's brother Billy, who still had the old family name, Billy Cook. Mumia grew up as Wesley Cook and renamed himself, which is quite easy in the United States. He and a friend of his had a stand where they sold trinkets in downtown Philadelphia, and that often went into the night. And then something happened that you unfortunately have very often in the United States. It's called driving while black. He ran into police into a traffic stop for, I don't know, probably no reason. He didn't do anything wrong. There was an altercation between Billy Cook and the cop, and Mumia happened to be nearby with his taxi cab and ran to his brother's help. Everything else is subject to controversy. So the state's version is, here we see the same thing as graphic. The state's version is Jamal ran across the street, shot the cop in the back. The cop whirled around and managed to get a shot into Mumia's chest, fell down, and Mumia stood over him and killed him execution style. The probable source of this version is a motorist called Michael Schiffmann, as you see him here. He had, according to his own admission, he had a couple of drinks, and so everything that he told the police was actually quite unclear. So the original version, for example, was that he saw Mumia run across the street and shoot at the cop. But even at the trial, he had to admit that that was actually not what he saw. And he was also very unclear about what happened when the cop was actually killed. And then we have two other witnesses about whom we now know that they only claimed that they were there and saw the shooting. So one witness stood at the corner of 13th and Locust, the prostitute Cynthia White, and she claimed to have seen everything very clearly. But from all the evidence, and I can't go into that really now, we have a nice brochure which is called Tatort Besichtigung in German. Take a walk at the crime scene in English. Everything is really laid out very clearly. Also, I hope. Today we know that she was almost 2 blocks away from the scene. And I have a taping of one of her statements at the police precinct. And what you clearly hear is a frightened woman who was told what to say, who couldn't get the events straight. So she was blackmailed by the police to testify against Mumia. The police apparently thought, since they had the statement by Schiffmann, he must have been the doer, and so they needed additional witnesses, and she was one of the persons who happened to be around and was told what to say. The other person who testified against Mumia at the trial was a taxi driver by the name of Robert Jobert. He claimed to have stood right behind the scene, right behind the cars that were involved in the traffic stop. And what we now know is, no, he didn't stand there. He stood in a different direction and didn't even see the shooting. And we will encounter him later on when we come to the end of this story. So Mumia was successfully accused of murder, stood trial on July the 3rd. He was convicted. So trial began on June 17th, and later on only 17 days later he was convicted, and the jury found him guilty. I need to say a few words about the jury, because that will also become very important at the end. The jury was systematically sieved, and the prosecutor tried his very best to prevent any black person from being on the jury. And in a city that was 40% black at the time, only 2 of 12 people were on the jury. And if you analyze the numbers, there is a so-called right to peremptory strikes, meaning you can strike potential jurors for no good reason. And the likelihood that the prosecutor would use that against black persons was 10 times larger than for white persons. That already should tell you everything about the unfairness of that trial. Okay, here we have 2 persons involved. Only just a few remarks about this, because everything else can be read in the brochure. To the left we have Cynthia White, the witness who actually didn't see anything. To the right we have Robert Jobert, the taxi driver, who heard something, turned around and saw only the aftermath of the events. And in the middle we have a person who is probably key to the whole story, because he seems to be the one who stitched together the whole framework of Mumia Abu-Jamal. This is the ranking police officer at the scene, Inspector Giordano, and while we don't know who of the other cops on the beat who arrived at the scene knew Mumia from his reporting or other connections, we know that he knew him. And he was the first one, guess who talked to the taxi driver, Robert Jobert. Robert Jobert originally said the shooter had run away, and then he was led to the van where Mumia, who was shot in the chest, lay. And Giordano says, is this the man? And the cab driver makes a fateful decision and says, yes. And after that, he had to adapt everything he said. So he seems to be the mastermind behind this whole thing. Okay, here we have a graphic illustration of what happened during jury selection at the trial. 10 to 1 chance for a black juror to be on the jury. The trial was tainted by racism right from the start, and that's one of the reasons why the jury believed the evidence brought on by the prosecution, even though it was only paper thin, if even that. Okay, that photo you should know from the flyer. That's Mumia during the month in the run-up to the trial. And that was my very brief sketch of the general circumstances. This case has so many aspects that you could talk about it for hours, and people have done so. But I have 5 minutes to sketch what happened after that. Mumia was found guilty on flimsy to non-existent evidence. one additional reason why this was the case was that he was stripped of the right to defend himself by the trial judge. And the other reason was that he was defended by a court-appointed lawyer who was definitely not up to the task and who was able to do little. One reason being that he didn't have the means to do so. So the pre-trial judge denied him the means. He couldn't even hire a forensic investigator. And even though the evidence was so weak and a qualified defense lawyer would have had no trouble to destroy it, it was Mumia as a defendant was bound with his hands and gagged. He could do very little, and the conviction and the death sentence went into a second, third, fourth, fifth round. The first round was when the Pennsylvania Supreme Court in 1989 confirmed the conviction and the death sentence, and that was when the case began to become internationally known. So I heard about this case for the first time in 1990 in Berlin, because at that time Mumia was the only political prisoner because he was obviously arrested and convicted on account of his journalistic activities, because he was the only political prisoner sentenced to death in the United States. And that was also a major factor why the case became internationally known in the 1990s. And finally, for people like Annette and myself and other people who also got involved, to invoke ourselves when he got a second execution order in 1999. At the time, we didn't know that the execution order would be carried out because that was legally not possible, but it had that mobilizing effect on us. And we jumped into the fray in the expectation would be over soon, but here we still are. The one good thing, the one victory Mumia had in court was when his death sentence was overturned in 2001, actually the day before yesterday, on December 18th, 2001. But the judge still said, even though in his 272-page decision there were many doubts, with each doubt he said, oh, I doubted that, but I have to turn Abu-Jamal down. And that meant that his death sentence was converted into a life sentence without the possibility of parole. And that's unfortunately the fate of almost 200,000 people in the United States. They are in jail with either formally life without possibility of parole or with practically almost no possibility of parole. 200,000 prisoners, that's more than Spain, Portugal, France, the United Kingdom and Germany combined, just in order to give you a sense of the dimension. All in all, the United States has the highest per capita prisoner rate in the world. 2.1 million are in jail at the moment we are talking. Okay. Fast forward to the year 2018. In Philadelphia, a new district attorney had taken over, a reformist man by the name of Larry Krasner, who instituted very many very positive reforms. But one of the disappointments was not in the case of Mumia. All the same, in December 2018, in that district attorney's office, new material was discovered and turned over to the defense. And that relates directly to the things that I've been talking about, namely to the witness Cynthia White, to the witness Robert Joubert, and to the racism in jury selection. And I will just briefly recount this and then hand over to Linn Washington and Wendell Griffen. The first piece of evidence was a letter was found by Robert Joubert, written in August 1982, 1 month after the trial, where he asked the prosecutor basically, where's my money? You couldn't get clearer evidence for a bribed witness. The second thing was an exchange of letters of district attorney's office and penal offices in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, and it concerned the witness Cynthia White. The basic content was that she should be given preferential treatment for prostitution cases. At the time, prostitution was illegal in Pennsylvania. And guess what happened? 8 months after the trial, all of her 3 cases were thrown out. Even though she didn't even bother to appear in court. Normal case would be she would have been brought by police. Didn't happen. The final piece of evidence that was found was notes that the prosecutor made during jury selection. He made notes for each juror, and there was either a W or a B, and guess for what that stands. I leave it, all of you know English. What could that be the abbreviation for? So that was the third piece of evidence. And we had a lot of hope when this evidence was sent back to the trial court in Philadelphia, this time not under the original judge who had already died, but by a black judge, Judge Lucretia Clemens. And we made a letter campaign, we organized events, we addressed her very respectfully, and she delayed her decision not once but twice, so there was a lot of hope. But on March the 31st, the hammer came down, and Mumia was once more denied. And this is the point where I will hand over to Linn Washington and then Wendell Griffen, who will tell us more about the background to that.
Thank you, Dr. Schiffmann. I'd like to start by taking a minute, literally taking a minute, and ask all of you to think about a minute. Think about holding your breath for a minute. Thinking about not thinking about anything for a minute. Just clear your mind totally. So the question could be asked, okay, Washington, why are you talking about psychology when we're here to talk about Mumia Abu-Jamal? Well, Mumia Abu-Jamal has been behind bars since December 9th, 1981. And between December 9th, 1981 and today, it is over 22 million minutes. Mumia's been in prison for 42 years, 10 days, 504 months, over 2,100 weeks, in over 15,000 days. Being in jail for 1 minute is outrageous. Being in jail for 42 years for a crime that you didn't do is way beyond outrageous. Dr. Schiffmann has asked me to talk about jury discrimination in this case, and it's known as Batson. Batson is a ruling that came down, I think, in 1986 from the U.S. Supreme Court. In the United States Constitution, Article 6, it gives all American citizens the right to a trial before an impartial jury. That never happened for so many years in the United States, actually for so many decades when it comes to African Americans. There was a time when African Americans, be they enslaved or free, couldn't go into the court and testify. Definitely couldn't serve on juries. And because of the bigotry and the discrimination that came into a lot of juries, courts started making different rulings. There were instances in the South and in the North where a jury would hear a case, a murder case, where a person could be executed. The jury deliberations would last maybe 45 minutes that included a 30-minute lunch. So there was built-in discrimination and built-in unfairness in the system. So this Batson ruling in 1986 attempted to try to even out the scales of justice a little bit. And the ruling essentially said that if a prosecutor takes people off the jury for discriminatory purposes, then that is against the law. And that's what we've had with the Abu-Jamal case. Dr. Schiffmann noted that in Abu-Jamal's case, there were 10 whites on the jury, 2 blacks. Given the numbers in Philadelphia at that time, there should have been at least 5 on the jury if there was to be fairness. And when we talk about fairness and impartiality on the jury, we have jurors that told the judge before they were selected and put on the jury that they couldn't be fair. Now, how is that fair to have a person on the jury who says, I can't be fair? They had people on the jury who were friends and relatives of police officers. One of the persons who was on the jury said that one of his friends was a police officer who had been shot. So he definitely didn't think he could be fair. But that was the case that happened with Abu-Jamal. Now, something that is always forgotten by judges who have presided over this case, with the exception of one, we'll get to that in a minute. They forget the process. Part of the problem in law, with all deference to Judge Griffen, one of the problems in the law is that they just focus on little narrow things, and a lot of times the wider context gets lost. Abu-Jamal opted to represent himself. Not the best decision, particularly in a murder case of a cop, but he did it. During jury selection, the prosecutor came in one day and said to the judge, hey, judge, I think Abu-Jamal, with his dreadlocks, are frightening some of the jurors. So I think he should be taken off of representing himself. And that's what happened. So the judge took him, stripped him of his right to represent himself, thrust his lawyer in, who was a backup lawyer, who really didn't want to be there because him and Abu-Jamal had fallen out. And as Dr. Schiffmann said, the pretrial rulings had pretty much crippled his case because they didn't have enough money to hire investigators and other experts. So the whole trial was a farce. So the judge in many cases, this Judge Albert Sabo, who was so pro-prosecution and so bigoted on the eve of trial, he was overheard saying that he was going to help the prosecution fry Abu-Jamal. And he used a very racist epithet. It begins with E, so we'll just leave it at that. Sabo started picking some of the jurors. So we had a trial in front of a jury that was comprised of members who said they couldn't be fair. One of the persons that was on the jury was a woman who had asked the judge, could she have a few minutes in the evening to take one of her pets to a veterinarian. The judge denied it. She went ahead and did it, and she was removed. Now, just to show you the bigotry in the case, later during the trial, one of the white members of the jury asked to take a civil service test so he could become an employee of the city of Philadelphia. The judge stopped the trial. So we have funny business with the juries all along. Because of the way that the trial proceeded, with Abu-Jamal being pulled off and his backup attorney being thrust into it, there were a lot of procedural things that just didn't happen. So, for example, the attorney did not object at trial to what was, at that point, clear effort to exclude blacks from the jury. Now, when Abu-Jamal appealed his conviction the first time to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, that was the first time that the issue of jury selection was raised. It was raised by an attorney, an appeal attorney, who never read the transcripts. Well, just think about this. If you're in a college class and you're studying whatever, you're supposed to read the book, and you come into class and you start pontificating, you never read the book, you can't adequately talk about the book because you never read it. But this attorney filed an appeal for Abu-Jamal without even studying the transcript, knowing what happened in the trial. And also, this attorney at the time was gravely ill, had a brain tumor. So again, when we talk about rights, when we talk about fairness, how can a lawyer who doesn't know what the case is about, who has a grave illness, present anything that could be considered or should be considered an adequate appeal? The Pennsylvania Supreme Court rejected it. So let's flash forward to 1995. That was Abu-Jamal's first big appeal. And one of the issues in that appeal was the discrimination in the composition of the jury. Another thing that happened in that appeal was the bias of the original trial judge, Albert Sabo. Sabo stayed on the case, and he was so bad in terms of his bigotry and fundamental unfairness that even the media that covered it, and we're talking about scores of reporters from the New York Times all the way out to the far right-wing Washington Times, and all of them were criticizing the unfairness that Sabo was exhibiting. The two daily newspapers in Philadelphia that had been rabidly anti-Abu-Jamal were highly critical of Sabo, but the Pennsylvania Supreme Court let it go on. So this issue of discrimination in the jury selection became an element in the trial. And I'm going to tell you something, and remember this because it's important for what happens later. During the trial, the defense, Abu-Jamal's defense team, was trying to lay what they call in the law the foundation to be able to prove that there was jury discrimination. One of the witnesses that they wanted to bring on was somebody from the Philadelphia court system's jury pool person. So he could give information about how many people were on the potential jury, how many people could have been on it, all of these kind of details that courts require. It's not enough just to be innocent. You got to prove yourself innocent by underscoring every letter of that word innocent. When the defense team in '95 tried to present this information, Sabo said, no, it's irrelevant, I don't want to hear it. And one of the attorneys said, wait a minute, Your Honor, this is important to our case. The judge said, no. There were some other words there, and I'm sure there was other words in his mind, but he said no. The exchange got so intense that the judge actually jailed the attorney, put the attorney in jail, charged her with contempt of court. So that information, that vital information, that foundation that was needed, never came into the record. And again, in a minute, I'll tell you how that comes back to just show you the inherent unfairness in the Abu-Jamal case. The matter goes back up to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. They uphold it. During the process of it being upheld, one of the justices on the court was a former DA of Philadelphia. And Abu-Jamal's defense tried to get him off. He wrote a separate opinion saying, no, I'm not getting off. Why are you attacking me, saying that I'm pro-police just because they help me get elected to the court, pay some money to me, just because they made me the man of the year? And if you're going to criticize me, what about these other members of this same court that also receive money from FOP, Fraternal Order of Police? Now, why this is relevant, the Fraternal Order of Police has been the main entity that has sought to keep Abu-Jamal incarcerated, and during the first part of his incarceration, fought diligently for him to be executed. So in 1989, when the in 1998, I'm messing up on the dates. In 98, when they turned his bill down the second time, 5 members of a 7-member court had taken money from the main organization that wanted Abu-Jamal executed. I ask you, is that fair? So the thing bumps into federal court. The federal judge reads over it, makes many errors, monumental errors in his review of the case, but he did say that, well, there may be a little problem with this jury selection thing, so I'll bump it up to the appeals court. It went up to the Third Circuit Court of Appeal. In the federal court system, just like in the Pennsylvania court system, there's trial courts, appellate courts, and then there's the Supreme Court. When it comes up to the Third Circuit Federal Court of Appeals, what did they do? Did they apply the precedent, meaning did they apply the law that they had been using for years in the past? No, they changed the law. They said that Abu-Jamal could not win on the jury selection piece because he didn't raise an issue during the 1982 trial. Now, I started off by talking about Batson. Batson came down in 1986. So the Third Circuit Court of Appeals in the 21st century faulted Abu-Jamal's attorney for not following the specifics of a 1986 ruling in 1982. That would have been absolutely impossible, even if he had a crystal ball, and he didn't. But this just shows you how judges conscientiously manipulate the law and logic to keep Abu-Jamal incarcerated. I call that the Mumia exception. So the Third Circuit Court of Appeals fashioned what they called a contemporaneous objection. Now, to show you just how despicable that ruling is, one of the other elements in the ruling was Sabo's bias, the bias of the original trial judge. And the Third Circuit said, well, just because he made intemperate remarks, just because he acted like a butthead, well, they didn't say butthead, but that's what they were talking about, it didn't mean anything. And furthermore, if the defense was really as good as they said, they would have put on information about jury selection and who's in the pool and who's not. The very information that Sabo blocked from coming onto the record in 1995. So this just shows you how, again, how manifestly unfair this whole proceeding has been with Abu-Jamal. Let me flash forward for a few more years. Dr. Schiffmann talked about evidence that was discovered in 2018 of relevance. That evidence was discovered by the district attorney himself. He was going through the office trying to find out where things were because he had just been elected. They found a new floor that they didn't know existed between 2 floors. They found a storage cabinet. All this information was in there. That information had been withheld from the defense for 36 years. Now, Larry Krasner, to his credit, has exonerated 40 people who have served prison terms from 6 years to 41 years. The majority of those exonerations was because of misconduct by police and prosecutors, and the main misconduct by prosecutors was withholding evidence of innocence or evidence that's favorable to a defendant. And one of the items that was discovered was the actual trial notes from the prosecutor, where he was making a notation of who was black and who was white in a potential jury pool. That is absolute unequivocal evidence of discrimination, which should have won Abu-Jamal a new trial. Actually, it should have won him a release. It should have at least won him a new trial. And if not, at the very least, there should have been a hearing to determine whether the prosecutor was actually a bigot or not. But it didn't happen because of the institutional nature of the opposition against Abu-Jamal. Because this final thing that happened this year, we had a progressive DA, one who is now being attacked by conservatives because he's so progressive, and we had a black judge. And let me be clear, just because they're black, that doesn't mean that they have to rule in favor of all black people. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that a judge has to be impartial and a judge has to be fair according to their oath of office. And this woman wasn't. Furthermore, this woman was on a committee in Philadelphia where she made a video saying that anyone who sees race has an obligation to do something about it, and she didn't. So, in a nutshell, that's the Batson issue. But, without getting into too many legalisms and all of that, the reality is that Abu-Jamal has never, ever received fairness in the court system. Abu-Jamal was born in 1954. In 1959, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court came down with a ruling involving a murder case in Philadelphia where a guy pled guilty. And the prosecutor and the judge in that trial where the guy pled guilty ran roughshod over his rights. And the court said that all defendants are entitled to all provisions of their rights, regardless of the evidence of guilt housed as high as Mount Everest. So if you have that as precedent, how decades later can Abu-Jamal not get any of his rights because he has been targeted by the deep state? And I'll conclude there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linn, for this impressive presentation of the Batson issue. I would now ask you, Wendell, to continue this sad legal story and comment on Lucretia Glenn's ruling. Over to you, Wendell.
Thank you, Dr. Schiffmann. Good evening to you, and good day to Professor Washington in Pennsylvania, and good evening to your students and audience in Germany. I am communicating with you from my home office in Little Rock, Arkansas, where I served for 25 years as a trial and appellate court judge. For 13 years, I served as a judge on the Arkansas Court of Appeals, and I heard hundreds of appeals involving criminal cases up to including crimes of murder. And for the next 12 years, or the last 12 years of my judicial career, I served as a trial judge hearing criminal cases involving cases including up to murder. So I bring that experience to this conversation. I am also a public theologian. I have been an ordained minister in the religion of Jesus since 1988. I pastor a congregation in Little Rock, Arkansas titled New Millennium Church, and I am co-chair of the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference, an interdenominational African-American conference of clergy and laypersons and academics involved in liberation, theology, justice, peace, and fairness. I come to this setting and this conversation about Mumia Abu-Jamal, thanks to Dr. Schiffmann's wonderful research and consistent work. And I dare not speak about this without calling the name of our colleague and sister, Julia Wright, the daughter of the famed author Richard Wright, who has been a long-time Mumia Abu-Jamal advocate. I thank Dr. Schiffmann for his very thorough recitation of the background of the case, and I thank Professor Washington for his review of the legal proceedings, particularly the jury selection, the intemperate conduct of the trial judge, Arthur Sabo, and the efforts by the district attorney, by the prosecutors to conceal, not the efforts to conceal, the active concealment for 36 years of boxes of exculpatory evidence from the defense, which culminated in a decision in March of this year by Judge Lucretia Clemens, the judge of which Professor Washington spoke, who issued a 39-page ruling basically denying Mumia Abu-Jamal's latest attempt to obtain a fair evidentiary hearing related to his 1982 conviction for murder of Philadelphia police officer Daniel Faulkner. As Professor Washington mentioned, Judge Clemens ruled that Abu-Jamal's conviction and his accusation that the district attorney used peremptory challenges to strike black persons from the jury pool is time barred, even though there is no law that says that you run out of time in challenging unjust efforts to keep people from juries. Discrimination is wrong and is not like milk. Charges of discrimination do not basically turn sour simply because of passage of time. But Judge Clemens also ruled that even if she were to grant Abu-Jamal's contention that the district attorney violated his rights for failing for 36 years to disclose exculpatory information to his defense lawyers as required by the 1963 decision of the U.S. Supreme Court in a case called Brady versus Maryland, that she was convinced that the blatant violation of that law does not matter. I pause for effect. I pause for effect. A judge decided and announced that the concealment by prosecutors over a course of 36 years of evidence that was exculpatory, that pointed toward the possibility of innocence, an act which violates a 1963 decision by the U.S. Supreme Court, does not matter, even if she was convinced, that the district attorney violated Abu-Jamal's rights. I ask you to think about what that means. I contend, based on my years as a judge, but also my experience as a person concerned about justice, that what Judge Clemens did amounts to the latest evidence and the latest proof that the entire prosecution of Abu-Jamal was defined by nothing short of judicial fealty to police idolatry. Basically, the idolatry of the police, the notion that whatever the police say has to be right, whatever police do has to be right, and whatever is necessary to vindicate police conduct must be upheld, has all worked together to prevent Mumia Abu-Jamal from receiving the justice he deserves. That, more than anything else, is why he remains in prison. That, more than anything else, is why he, unless a miracle happens, will die in prison. And that, more than anything else, is what the U.S. system of justice is depending on to ensure that Mumia Abu-Jamal never leaves prison alive. I think about these realities and wonder if we are able to accept the truth they show. Because what they show, without question, is that over a course of almost 4.5 decades, Jamal has been in prison going on 43 years now. Over the course of almost 4.5 decades, the legal system in the state that calls itself the foundation of liberty, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, is where the American Liberty Bell is housed. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania is where the Declaration of Independence was enshrined. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania hails itself as the city of brotherly love. And so, more than anything else, the conviction and continued imprisonment of Mumia Abu-Jamal is dramatic proof of the blatant hypocrisy surrounding the U.S. legal system when it comes to criminal punishment of persons who are the so-called enemies of the police culture. It also proves something else. It proves the fealty of the media to the police. And it proves the power of the police culture over what's supposed to be the judiciary. As Professor Washington mentioned, the Fraternal Order of Police has been the driving force behind all efforts to prevent Mumia Abu-Jamal from being released from prison. Judge Clemens, in 2023, refused to even hold an evidentiary hearing, let alone overturn the conviction. What we do not recognize is that a judge or an entire judiciary that is under the sway of the largest police organization in the United States is not truly independent and therefore cannot be truly fair. That judge cannot act with courage because he or she is literally looking toward their next election and whether or not they will win the endorsement and therefore the support of the Fraternal Order of Police, its members, and the public at large. Finally, I think we should ask ourselves, what Mumia Abu-Jamal's conviction and continued imprisonment show about the larger issue of justice, not only in the United States, but across the world. I recognize that the same mindset that prevents Lucretia Clemens, a black judge in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, from doing right by Mumia Abu-Jamal, also poisons the U.S. political system to understand how the conduct of a police state like that of Israel toward a black community or a dark community called Gaza and the Palestinians is aligned. The same kind of hatefulness, the same kind of blindness, the same kind of bigotry that Mumia Abu-Jamal suffers, I see operating today against Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza. And the same United States that hails itself as the land of the free and the home of the brave in this country is equally hypocritical towards Palestinians, Gazans, and Christians who are poor and marginalized across the world. I want to thank Professor Schiffmann for hosting this event, and I want to thank Professor Washington for his commentary. I hope that my input has been somewhat helpful, and I welcome the questions and feedback that we will have following. Dr. Schiffmann, I return the floor to you, sir.
Thank you so very, very much, Reverend Wendell Griffen, and thank you also, Professor Washington. I wish I was also a professor. I would be in less dire straits at this institute. I'm just a little doctor and adjunct professor, if even that. I want to hand over now. There's a lot of other material which I will not even bring on here. I now want to hand over to the audience, both the international audience that's here via the internet and the persons who are here in person. I'm sure there are lots of questions. Jennifer.
Yes, so on that fateful day that police Faulkner was killed, I have a couple of questions. For one, did Mumia that day have a gun? Did he ever shoot a gun? Was there any residue of gunpowder on his hand? And lastly, who shot Mumia?
Well, this is really a bunch of questions. Anybody who really wants to know the details of this case, I refer to my website, dropthecaseagainstmumiaabu-jamal.com, where there is multiple material, not only by myself, where this is investigated in detail. The short answer is, even I, after 25 years of studying the case, I'm not really sure about what happened, but I have a likely version of what happened. So one thing I would bet not just my hand, but even my head on, is that this was not a case of murder in the first degree. So one of the things that really seem to be sure to say is that the first person who fired the shot during that night was the cop himself. That's one of the reasons why I said I have a few good things about him to say about him. So first he did the driving while black thing, and beat up Mumia's brother for no good reason, and then he seems to have panicked in the presence of several black persons who he thought had reason to be afraid of, and fired into Mumia's chest. One possibility, which I tend to discount, was then that Mumia, who was known as a peaceful person, but nobody knows how they react when finding themselves in such a situation. One possibility is that he just lost it and fought back first, somehow shot the cop into the back and then blew his brains out. The whole configuration makes that pretty unlikely. The most likely version, in my view, and that's ironically corroborated by the non-witness or false witness Robert Joubert, who said he saw a person, the shooter, run away. Mumia's brother operated his stand with a person who he was almost always together with. They were in the formulation of Linn Washington, like Ike and Mike. They nearly always hung out together, and so they were probably unwinding that evening also. Actually, it was 4 o'clock in the morning. So the most likely version, in my view, is that the cop saw himself surrounded by 3 presumably hostile blacks, did what cops in such situations, and even less threatening situations in the United States often do, shot at Mumia, who came running towards the scene, and that other person known by the name of Ken Freeman, got out of the car and finished off the car and ran away. That's the most likely version. As I said, and I don't want to push things too far and exaggerate, I don't know. Mumia has always taken the position, I'm talking about this in detail, only once I'm in front of a real court and not a kangaroo court. And he has stood by that to this day. What he did say at the very end of his trial, he said, I'm innocent of these charges, murder in the first degree, and whatever you people decide, I'm still innocent of these charges. So why did he say that? Why did he talk about murder in the first degree? Why didn't he simply say, I didn't shoot the cop? Well, I think there are 2 reasons for that. His brother was also involved. He was convicted before Mumia for aggravated assault, and the only potential persons who could be accused, if Mumia says I didn't shoot the cop, were his own brother and the best buddy of his brother, who was also friends with the Cook family in general. And Mumia being Mumia, I can even imagine that he didn't want to do that and that he just left the possibility open. This is just a speculation, I don't know. But what we should focus on, rather than what actually happened, is really, is Mumia, which he would have to be, according to the law, is he guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of that crime, if it was a crime and not self-defense? And the answer to that is there is virtually no evidence. All the evidence is fake. And for example, had that come up at the trial, that the witness Robert Joubert was bribed, even that jury, the trial would have ended then and there. Even that jury would have thrown the case out. And that's actually what this little brochure is devoted to. I have also a long article where I speculate what really happened. But the brochure is devoted to the fact that this was a frame-up and all the evidence was not real evidence. So that would be a short answer to that.
Professor Schiffmann, if I may, I'm gonna pitch it to Professor Washington, because
Yes.
I know that Professor Washington has made some observations, and Professor Washington, you can tell me I'm out of my place, and I will take it, because I can not hold you in contempt, and you can say it with impunity. But I believe I recall from a previous setting, you mentioned that there was no gunshot residue found on Mumia's hands, and that had there been, and also that the round that was taken from Officer Faulkner was from a different caliber from the handgun that was taken from Mumia. Now, am I remembering correctly, sir?
Yes, Your Honor. You followed the case closely. There was, whenever there's a shooting, the police normally do what they call a gunshot residue test, where they put chemicals on a person's hand, and that would show the gunpowder that comes off when you fire a gun. The police officers contend that they did not take that test because they did not think that Abu-Jamal would agree to it. Now let's understand that this was the same Abu-Jamal who was handcuffed to a hospital bed, sedated. So they could have come in and literally done anything to him. So this is one of the many irregularities in this case. This is one of these cases that's built on a unicorn, a pink one. No, they don't exist. Now, in terms of the caliber of the weapon, there is a preliminary report from the medical examiner, the person who did the autopsy on a police officer, and he noted that the bullet that he saw was more consistent with a .44 Magnum versus the caliber weapon that they said that Abu-Jamal carried, which was a .38. You don't have to be a ballistics expert to see very clearly that there is a difference in size. The bullet that comes out of a .44 Magnum is 244 grains. The bullet that comes out of a .38 Special is 95 grains. So unfortunately in Philadelphia, medical examiners have an expertise in taking bullets out of people because there's so many shootings going on here. So that medical examiner, their expertise would be something that you could rely on. Now at trial, when that came up, the prosecutor said, well, Your Honor, and the jury, the medical examiner is not a ballistics expert, was to try to get away from that notation. And then the very next day, he asked the judge to certify the very same person as a ballistics expert to get some other evidence on the record. So you could just see how they just go around in circles and twist all stuff up, all for the purpose of convicting and continue to incarcerate Mumia Abu-Jamal.
I pitched that to Professor Washington because as I mentioned in chapter 12 of my book, Parables, Politics, and Prophetic Faith, where I wrote at length about the decision by Judge Clemens, it would have required a certain amount of courage on the part of a judge, but a necessary courage that a judge has to have to look at the totality of the evidence and realize that what happened in Abu-Jamal's case was a miscarriage of justice. What Professor Washington just recounted is just one example of that miscarriage. However, that kind of courage and I will go further, that commitment to judicial independence and integrity has been woefully absent across the history of Mumia Abu-Jamal's case. I apologize for being so lengthy, but Professor Schiffmann, thank you for letting me, Dr. Schiffmann, thank you for letting me add those observations. And I hope that responded to the question that was put to us.
Yeah, you're most welcome.
I was trying to find, I have a bag of bullets that you could use to show this, and I was, it's hard for me to get this right. But anyway, what this is a .357 Magnum, and this is the bullet between the 38 and a 44, and you can see, I mean, you just look at it, right? 44 Magnum will be like this big. So, again, you don't need to be a ballistics expert to see that if the medical examiner said it was this size, then it was. And I guess I should say something else. The bullet that was removed from the slain officer, by the time it got down to the police ballistic lab from the medical examiner's office, some parts of it were missing. It was in custody all along, Your Honor, the chain of custody was maintained, but something happened. And the last time that I checked on a bullet, they don't have feet, so somebody removed it. The bullet didn't jump out of the bag and run away by itself.
I mean, what you can say about this general case and ballistic and criminal forensic aspects is they were so sure that they could do this frame up that they really didn't give a damn. Because in 2006 I discovered photographs by the press photographer who was there, the only one. And what you can see there, one of the two first police officers who came to the scene recovered the guns of both Abu-Jamal and the slain officer. And guess what? He's running around with them in his bare hands. For 90 minutes he's running around with the guns in his bare hands. On another photograph, you can see that the taxi cab of Robert Jobert, who we talked about, is not where he claimed that it had been. On the third photo, and actually on several photos, you can see that the version that was presented, the version of the killing of Officer Faulkner that was presented at the trial, cannot be true, because that version had the officer lie on the sidewalk with Abu-Jamal firing several bullets at him, most of which missed, but there are no bullet divots in the sidewalk, and so on and so forth. They really didn't give an F, they really didn't give a damn, and that is the whole case. And the tragic part of that is this should be known to the district attorney's office, and actually I sent them a whole book. This book is so thick, it's called Facts Matter. It's so thick that I couldn't upload it on our university platform, which has a maximum of 200 pages. They should know it. If they were interested, Judge Lucretia Clemens could know this. Larry Krasner could know this, and the prosecutors who he assigned to this case, they could know it, and rightfully Judge Wendell mentioned the media. The Philadelphia media could know this, because I sent it to them in part in hard copy. They don't give a damn, and that's really where our problem lies. The second part of our problem lies in the fact that with the turning down of Mumia's appeal by Judge Clemens, his legal road is effectively closed, because the next stage will be the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and we already kind of know what the Pennsylvania Supreme Court will do. And after that, there is another possibility to appealed it to the United States Supreme Court. And after Trump, I don't even think that we need to talk about that. Where does that leave us? Wendell said, well, only a miracle can now save Mumia. And I would say to everybody who participates here and who is interested in this case, the only way is to save him is for us to be that miracle. I found something very important on Wendell's website. Not only Jesus of Galilee, hope fiercely, love boldly, love one another. After that comes another saying, and that's by Hannibal of Carthage. We will find a way or make one. And that's really the road before us, I think. And yesterday, when I was, for a change, I've been agitating and preparing and so on and so forth to the point of craziness for this event. And every now and then, in order to regain sanity, I turn to linguistics books. And guess what I found in the introduction of one of them? It's an African proverb. And it goes like this: if you think that you are too small to make a difference, you haven't spent the night with a mosquito. So let's take it from there. I think I've planned this for 90 minutes. We are now in minute 96. I think it's time to kind of wind up, but not without something that I was sent by the co-editor of this book, Stéphane Francin. He's also on this call. He's watching it. And let me just play this for you. Just to give you the orientation, it's 4 minutes, and after that we can say goodbye to each other.
We never let you down. We never
thanks for everybody who contributed to making this possible. And let this come true that we are here for Mumia and that we don't give up. As I said in the afterword to our book, Text aus dem Todestag, this was the last section actually. It's not over until it's over.
Yeah, and I want you to give an applause to our international guests, please, so that for once they hear that we are here. Thank you. Thank you for being with us.